Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman.
This week on Heroic Media, Catholics and evangelicals unite on marriage.
One author urges women to date men who inspire them.
2 cake shops in Colorado defend their religious liberty.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media. So here at Heroic Media, we deal with news headlines that discuss issues of family and marriage and life. And the reason that we focus on those is that those are really the foundations and the fundamentals upon which society is built.
Exactly. And a lot of times the topics that we'll cover will be around abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly. So Patrick, what's our first story?
All right, in our first story, Catholic and Protestant leaders have united to call all Christians to an unwavering defense of the truth of marriage. So this is nice.
Very interesting.
It's great when you see different religions coming together, especially Christian religions, well, all religions, but especially Christian religions, come together to defend marriage and kind of make a statement. In a time where it seems like society has kind of fallen apart in terms of its view on what marriage is and what it isn't. And it's nice to see people come together and say, hey, listen, even though we have these differences, this is like really a fundamental principle, a fundamental value, something that we really need in society, and it shouldn't be changed.
Absolutely. I think that's a key point. This is a really interesting ecumenical effort where you have these Catholics and these evangelical Protestants, 2 groups that are both Christian but don't necessarily agree on everything. And they're coming together, these 20 prominent leaders, to write this statement in First Things magazine, which is an ecumenical magazine. And so what they're saying is, they're talking about marriage, and they say, we apologize to anyone who has been injured or suffered injustice as a result of their same-sex attraction. And so they are saying, we need to have a fundamental dignity and respect for these human persons, but then at the same time they say, if we're going to be true to the principles of the Christian faith, there can be no compromise on marriage. That's what they're saying. There can be no compromise. So they're just making it very clear that this is very important and this is something we need to stand up for.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that stood out to me in what they said. There were so many great things that they said, and one of the things that stood out to me was, and I was glad that they took the time to address people with same-sex attraction, and they really encourage those with same-sex attraction to kind of search for a genuine freedom in the truth, in God's truth, basically. And it brought to mind a video I've seen. It's by Blackstone Films, and it's called The Third Way. And because a lot of times people will be like, oh, that's just something, homosexual people really believe that or feel that way, that, you can find liberation in the truth of God about these things. But there are several people in that video who have come out saying, hey, yeah, no, this is totally true. This is, let me share you my life experience and how really the truth of God has set me free.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I liked that they addressed all people and not just hey, this is what we believe and there's no changing it. It was very rational, and it was rooted in what you could see in nature and also what is in Scripture.
Right. I think that's a key point, that they're saying, hey, this truth of marriage is something that we learn through faith and through revelation, but also through nature and through reason. We see that this is the foundation of society. Man and woman unite in the sexual union. That's where children come from. That's where the next generation comes from. And so that union of man and woman is something that is special and set aside. So I really like that they're appealing to both faith and nature and saying, look, this is just a truth that's written on the human heart. Yeah,
absolutely. And so this statement is titled, "The Two Shall Become One Flesh, Reclaiming Marriage." And one of the things that they say right off the bat is, in this joint statement, is we affirm strongly and without qualification, following the clear testimony of Holy Scripture, that marriage is a unique and privileged sign of the union of Christ with His people and of God with His creation. And it can only serve as that sign when a man and a woman are solemnly joined together in a permanent union. So I think it hits on all the parts. And it also talks, one of the things that I also liked about it was that it mentions Christians and how their marital relationship has been affected, over the years after the sexual revolution and everything. And I think that it's really key to point that out, because if Christians aren't a good representation of what where marriage should be, which what they talk about here is a permanent union, right? There's so much divorce and remarriage that occurs, and basically when heterosexual couples get married and then they treat marriage as if it's not something special and just break it off and then go marry some other person and then just kind of trash the institution, it makes it a lot easier for other people to just say, well, hey, you guys don't care about marriage. They don't say this straight up, but that's what the mentality is. Hey, you guys don't care about this, so we're just going to make a law that says, this is what it is.
Absolutely. I think it's so important for us to recognize that same-sex marriage didn't come out of nowhere, but rather the institution of marriage has been attacked and sort of chipped away slowly by all these different things. So, the whole sexual revolution, divorce and acceptance of promiscuity and premarital sex, cohabitation. I think it's very interesting here that they mention a contraceptive mentality.
Yes, exactly.
They mention that twice. They don't say contraception specifically, but they say a contraceptive mentality.
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting because our Protestant brothers and sisters largely do not agree with Catholic teaching on this. They think it's okay. They think contraception is okay. They used to be opposed to it, but they changed their teaching a number of years ago. So here we have a group of evangelicals that's saying, wait a second, if we have this mentality that says sex is purely recreational, maybe that's contributing to a shift in the understanding of sexuality that's then paving the way for same-sex marriage. So I think that's a really interesting development in what some of the evangelicals are saying here. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a notable point because, like you said, a lot of non-Catholic Christians have the viewpoint that it's okay. I mean, there's plenty of Catholics that think it's okay too, but the Catholic Church officially teaches that no, you should not partake in contraception, right? So I think that it's very notable that other Christian faiths have come out and have really said, no, this is the way that it is, right? Because there was one point where all Christian denominations said, hey, no, contraception is not something that you should practice. And just like you said, just chipping away at it. And that's really what happens, or it was really, I think it was a very Catholic view, where all Christian religions in relation to contraception and marriage, and then slowly you start chipping away. You get one one sect or one division of Christianity that says, oh no, it's okay, and then all the others kind of follow suit. Exactly. And it just then it paves the way for redefining marriage as, oh well, if this doesn't matter, and you can just marry and remarry, divorce, get remarried, and it doesn't really matter. Then it paves the way for homosexual marriage. Why would it matter? It doesn't matter. There's no difference between a man and a woman. We're all people. It doesn't matter who you marry.
Right. And then because they're placing this issue of same-sex marriage in the broader context, they see the solution as being a broader solution. So it's not just we need to fight a redefinition of marriage in the courts. That's one component of it. But it's actually saying we need to heal the broader marriage culture. So I thought this was interesting. It says we owe our fellow citizens a socially engaged witness to the truth about marriage.
Exactly.
So they're actually saying it's our duty to stand up for this, for the good of society, because marriage is such a foundational part of society. Everything gets affected by a redefinition. Our religious liberty, the understanding of family, children, everything is going to get affected by a redefinition. And so it's our duty to stand up and proclaim the truth about this.
Absolutely. I also had that down. I thought that was a great way to kind of end that. And I think they did a great job summarizing it and hitting on all the points and being very succinct. So we'll see what happens.
In our next story, what are the characteristics of a good future spouse? Among other traits, one author is encouraging women to look for a man who inspires them.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
A topic I didn't really think we'd be discussing, but I think it's pertinent, right? And one of the things that she said stood out to me was, she said right off the bat, is that there's a general lack of confidence in women. And I do think that in single women looking for men. And I think that that's very important to note, because I feel like I've seen that a lot of times with women that are looking for other women, or for other men. She says all these women who are looking for a man are kind of like what, I can't remember the verbiage she used, but they're not playing up to the competition or whatever. They're kind of looking for somebody lower than who they should be looking for, and they really need to challenge themselves basically to find somebody who exceeds their expectations instead of dropping below their expectations. But she does a good job of balancing it out. I think you could take this too far. I've seen it with a lot of my guy friends that are looking for a girl, and it's like their expectations are way like they're looking for the wrong things, especially. But I think it applies also, and she kind of hints on some of these things. What do you think?
I think it's interesting. I think, you know, there's an interesting dynamic here. Is it that women aren't confident in what they want? Is it that they just find that the men are setting the bar so low that they can't find any men? You know, it's an interesting dynamic, and it does kind of go both ways. And I think, as you mentioned, there's a balance between, you can't have this sort of fairy tale expectation that this guy is going to be so perfect, and then when every man has flaws, and so you just go through, he doesn't work, he doesn't work, he doesn't work.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting balance as far as expectations. But the one quote that I liked here, she said, if you are someone who wants marriage, it's important to find a man who both compliments and challenges you. And I think that's so true. You have to be able to identify the weaknesses of the person you're dating and say, okay, be realistic about them. First of all, if you're denying that this person has weaknesses, then you probably haven't been dating long enough. But to say, okay, what are these weaknesses, and are they the kind of red flags that I should really be worried about? Can I live with these weaknesses? And does this person acknowledge their weaknesses? Are they trying to grow in them? And are these the kind of weaknesses that are going to drag me down, or the kind of weaknesses that do we complement each other with our strengths and weaknesses? So all those things, I think, kind of go into it.
Yeah, I think that's great that she said that. One of the things that also stood out to me was she said, you know, what characteristics, what character qualities do you admire about him? And I think that is really important, because that's one of the big things that's really important, because it's easy to get caught in the superficial things about the opposite sex, you know, when you're trying to find somebody, and, you know, maybe their nose isn't perfect, or their hair isn't the right color that you imagined, right? Like you're talking about this, you know, kind of fairy tale, you know, like a vision of who you're going to be marrying, or who you might want to marry. I think it's really important. The higher priority are those character qualities, right? Because we should really be judging people by the quality of their character.
Absolutely.
And so I liked that she said that. I thought that was one, and she said that as one of the first things off the bat. Like, how do you know you're looking for the right person? Well, look at their character. Right. So I really like that, and I think it is important for people, like you already mentioned, like people to you know, to feel inspired and feel like you can build off of each other instead of, you know, bring each other down.
Yeah. Does being around this person make you want to be the best version of yourself? And does this person also identify your weaknesses in a kind way, not sort of belittling you, but does this person encourage you to grow? You know, I think that the marriage is supposed to lead us together towards God, and so if you have two spouses who are helping each other grow and helping each other patiently and lovingly overcome their weaknesses, then that's going to be ideal. If you have someone who's denying the weaknesses, or else really not helping at all, then that's not a good situation.
Absolutely. And also along the lines of encouragement, I know you mentioned that. I think it was interesting. She said something, you know, about like, if you're not into at all to what makes him tick, then, you know, you're probably not finding the right. You're probably not trying to you know, you haven't found the right person, basically. And it made me really think about that, because for me, there's certain things like that, I don't want to say they make me tick, but that I'm interested in. Like, for instance, I like to garden, which is kind of a rare trait, especially for a guy, but I like gardening. And my wife, she couldn't save a little plant to save her life. Like, she couldn't, you know, like just a little potted plant in the house. Like, and she knows this, so it's no, like, you know, nothing bad on her. But, you know, she takes a sincere interest in what I'm doing, and she likes it. You know, she might not be out there wanting to help me all the time, but she totally, you know, she's not into it, but she's there for me, and she likes to help me out and encourage me. So I think it's important to make sure that you have somebody that you find that has that care about your interests.
I think that's a really good point. You don't have to have all the same interests, but supporting each other in each other's interests.
Exactly, that's the key.
Great. Coming up after the break, what does cake have to do with religious freedom?
Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. In our next story, religious freedom and cake have become heated topics in Colorado as two different bakers object to making cakes on different sides of the same-sex marriage debate.
Interesting topic.
Very interesting topic.
Right? Same city, roughly general same area, and two different approaches to this whole who gets to make a cake or not issue, right?
Raising some very interesting questions.
Yeah.
So to give our viewers a little bit of background, there's a baker in Lakewood named Jack Phillips, and someone asked him to make a gay wedding cake, and he said that he had moral objections and couldn't do it. He said, I'd be happy to make a cake for gay individuals, for a birthday or a graduation, but this event, this gay marriage, I object to it, and so I can't make this cake.
Right.
And so there was a complaint filed against him, and he was told by an administrative court that he had to make this cake, and then he was ordered to undergo some retraining to sensitivity training, and basically they told him you can't do this.
Right.
Then several months later, there's a case where someone comes in to a different baker and asks for some type of anti-gay cake. It's a little bit unclear what exactly was asked for,
right.
But basically is then told, no, I object to that message, I'm not going to make it. And now people are saying, well, she shouldn't have to make that cake because she disagrees with what's being said.
Exactly.
So raises some very interesting questions.
Right. So should she be forced to make that cake?
Should either of them?
Should either of them, right? Well, we already, I guess, kind of know the answer to the other one. Apparently, the laws say Jack Phillips has to make that cake, but now it's on the flip side of the coin. So it's like, okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. So. I had the opportunity to speak with Jenny Kraska, the executive director of the Colorado Catholic Conference. Let's take a look at what she said. Jenny, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, do you see a double standard in these two cake scenarios?
Absolutely. I mean, the double standard really lies at the heart of what is free speech and what is religious liberty, and what constitutional guarantees do we have or do we not have when it comes to this issue. I mean, literally what the courts and what the Colorado Civil Rights Division are going to have to figure out is, when is it okay for one person to not bake a cake because of religious differences or religious reasons, and another person has to bake the cake. I mean, it's sort of it is definitely setting up a double standard, legally, politically, just in terms of our Constitution.
And the Colorado Civil Rights Commissioner, in making a statement about Jack Phillips, the first cake baker, he actually compared him to a perpetrator of the Holocaust and said that religion and religious freedom have been used to justify the Holocaust and slavery. What do you think of that statement and that comparison?
I think the statement is extraordinarily ignorant. I think it is irresponsible for an elected official to be making a statement like that would compare people's choice based on personally held religious beliefs to not, in Jack's case, not bake a cake akin to the Holocaust or slavery. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that we've gotten to a point in American culture and time where people are literally comparing things to religious belief to the Holocaust. It's not altogether surprising given where we saw our civil unions debate go a few years back, and these exact kind of comparisons were made to people who were trying to offer a religious liberty exemption for adoption and foster care agencies. So in some respects, it's not completely surprising to me, but I do think that elected officials who make statements like that are doing a great disservice to the office that they hold and to the state's constitution.
And why, can you explain, why is religious freedom important to society? Why is this something we should care about?
I think it's something that we should care about because it's fundamentally why this country was founded. I mean, we were founded on the basis that we were going to be free from an overarching monarchy or some sort of religious mandates that were going to be put onto us. We really believe deeply, and many people fought and died for our right to worship and to believe in the public square what we want to believe. Obviously, there's always going to be things that are not appropriate and whatnot, and courts have decided those kind of things. But in the instance of what we're looking at with the cake baking cases, this is something that we should protect at all costs, and that is our right to speech and our right to religious freedom.
Do you see hostility towards religious freedom in society today? Do you think that's growing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just when you just look at all the different kind of cases that are out there, the legislative battles that have happened all over the country, the things that we're dealing with in terms of the HHS mandate and religious freedom, I think that it's definitely fair to say that we are seeing a sharp increase in the kind of things that we're dealing with in terms of religious liberty and the discrimination that people of faith who have deeply held convictions are experiencing right now.
Where do you see this going, and what can Catholics do about it?
Sure. I mean, I think right now a lot of it is headed towards the courts. I don't think that there is a lot of I guess, enough goodwill on both sides of this issue that people are going to be willing anytime soon, at least in my view, that people will come to the table and maybe figure out some of these things. Just last week we had the LDS Church come out and say that they would support anti-discrimination laws as long as there were robust religious liberty protections. Immediately, the other side of that debate came out and said, "No, we're not going to work with you to get that done." I think it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that as a country founded on certain beliefs and principles about religious liberty and free speech, that we can't find some common ground on these kind of issues and understand that we might not all agree, and that's okay, but we should be able to protect our right to disagree, whether that's based on religion or not. I mean, we should be able to protect that fundamental freedom that we are guaranteed in our Constitution.
Absolutely. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for being here. Sure. Thank you for your insight and for sharing it with us.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, that was a good conversation you guys had. I think you had some really good questions. What was one of the things that stood out to you most about what she said?
I think just her point that there's a double standard here because, what we're saying is, we as a culture, as a society are saying is that it's not okay to decline to write this one message on a cake, but it is okay to decline to write this other message. And exactly. I don't know how many bakers you know or cake makers, but I know a couple, and really they consider their work a work of art. It's a work of artistic expression. So to be forced to make something that you disagree with is very problematic, and I think that's what I see here. I think that that's the biggest problem too, and the double standard is really what gets me. And whatever it was that he had asked her to write, is up in the air at this point. But I think just the principle behind it, I think that I'm just really curious to see how this pans out in the future, how this plays out, to see what exactly happens, because I think this could have a large effect on both sides. Absolutely. We'll see if the courts get involved. Yep, exactly. Coming up, we have one more story, so stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In our final story, Catholic blogger Hallie Lord recently shared her thoughts on love in the time of scarlet fever. So I was like, what? Scarlet fever? So, right? You don't hear about that very often. Yeah, apparently scarlet fever is still around despite my misconceptions. You can get it from strep. But anyway, she recently shared her thoughts just about with her family, and apparently her entire family, which she has a family of 8, they all got sick. And she didn't know it was scarlet fever at the time. Everybody was really sick, and her husband was really taking care of everybody and just not complaining about anything, just like getting it done. And she was really just reflecting on the fact that that's what love is. And lo and behold, they ended up going to the emergency room and found out that they all had scarlet fever and that he was actually the worst out of all of them. And so this blog was just kind of a reflection on family life and kind of a different perspective of just what it means to love. Right, you're right, exactly. And this quote from her I thought was kind of fun. She said, "I used to think love was freshly picked magnolias, playing puddle jumping, and holding hands in the rain. I thought it was sweet nothings and kisses behind the ear. I thought it was letters penned with passion and odes to love carved into the sand." Right. And basically she's saying, all these romantic ideas of love that I had, well, now I realize that's part of it, but real love is sacrifice. Real love is caring for your sick wife and kids to the point that you end up getting sick. Real life is sacrifice. Real life is Christ on the cross. That's love. Yep, exactly. And she fully admits that, she's had blog posts before where she's like, man, marriage is hard. And it is hard, right? It's something that you have to work on. You're going to have your ups and your downs. And this is just one of those situations that really shows you your love can really shine through. And, I've experienced it before too, when your kids are sick and, they're all throwing up or something and you're just like, oh man, you kind of have to die to yourself and take care of these poor little human beings that need your help, right? So it's really a kind of a humbling experience, and it kind of, you have to think about other people other than yourself. I think that's one of the great things about having a family, is it really teaches you to kind of put your own,
selfish desires aside and put the desires of others. And I think this is, first, and this is a great example.
This is, and I think it's important, we talked earlier about having realistic expectations when you're dating. I think you should have realistic expectations of marriage. If marriage is not just one long date. Marriage is, the everyday, going through day in and day out, and it's difficult, and it's the hard times, and it's the sacrifice, and it's worrying about money and worrying about family and making difficult decisions, and that's what marriage is. And when you enter into it, you have to realize that, there are going to be ups and downs, but ultimately you have the grace of God to get you through it. And that's really what you're relying on. You're not relying on your own efforts. You're relying on God's grace.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the important things in marriage to do, is to sit down with your spouse and say, listen, God, I can't do this all on my own. Please give me the grace to strengthen my marriage and help me to be, for myself, the father and husband that I need to be. And so I think that that's really important. I think when people do pray like that and receive those graces from God, you can see the results of that, the fruits of that labor. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So this was really good. I think this was just a nice little insight for people, like, oh, this is the reality. This is what it's like. There are times when we praise marriage and when we say, look how great this is, and that's important too, because it is great. But here's just a little insight into how challenging it can be.
Right. We don't want to be fake about it and say that it's all roses all the time, because it's not.
Exactly.
So. All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can check out more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode.
That's it for this time. Until next week, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.